my gambling-obsessed grandkids. The over-under on the pound of the Thanksgiving turkey is 23 and a half.
Hi, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Welcome to Park Ridge Sports History. This is Will O'Toole, your host. I'd like to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you spend a lot of time with your families and friends and don't overeat too much, although I know that is part of the beauty of Thanksgiving, to stuff yourself not just turkey, but all vegetables, of course, the desserts, and everything else that accompanies Thanksgiving Day dinner. This week, I'd like to, do a shout out for the NFL and the teams that play on Thanksgiving. I know that the Giants will be playing the Cowboys, one of the traditional teams that play on Thanksgiving, and also one of my perennial favorite teams. I know I seem to really take a lot of time on the Detroit Lions, but they are an interesting franchise in that they have Thanksgiving Day, or since 1934, they've had Thanksgiving Day, the bowl game. Actually, I do consider it a bowl game because it is a lot of fun. And winning Thanksgiving Day is a special, it's a special feeling for the teams that are involved to win that day. And it has become really a true part of Thanksgiving is to watch the NFL on TV and really cut away from the game to cut to the turkey and then come back, watch a little bit more of the game, go back, have a little bit more turkey, go back, watch a little bit more of the game, go back, have a little bit more dessert, go back and watch a little bit more of the NFL game. And then after you're stuffed by 4 or 5 o'clock, digest your food, you have a little dessert. Then you go back, you watch the NFL. And then after you're stuffed again with all the dessert, you've put everything away. Now an 8 o'clock game arrives. And then what do? You go back to the refrigerator for some leftovers, usually a great turkey sandwich, glass of milk, and maybe some additional pumpkin pie. At least has been one of my traditions as I watch the games on Thursday, and actually they spill into Friday and then Saturday because I one of the beauties of Thanksgiving, and this I know for a sports obsessed person, I love the day. It is without a doubt, outside of July 4th, it is probably the two best holidays that all Americans can celebrate, no matter what race, color, creed. We can all celebrate both Thanksgiving and the 4th of July and have a lot of fun with it. 4th of July, I simply love because it is the summer. There's not much preparation other than to put the coals on the barbecue, buy enough hot dogs, and hamburgers, some beer, some lemonade, some iced tea, and just all day you can have a nice barbecue with friends and family, listen to the ball games, and sit outside. Thanksgiving is a little bit different. That is definitely an indoor celebration, especially this year. I feel bad for the folks up in Buffalo who are facing about 6 feet, not 6 inches, 6 feet in some parts of Buffalo of snow. I mean, that doesn't even melt if you're lucky until July of 2023. So definitely it's going to be an indoor event, Thanksgiving. And but this week really started last Saturday because college has really secured quite a place with Thanksgiving if you are a huge sports fanatic like I am. They start the college basketball season usually with a number of tournaments or great matchups out of conference. I know that Seton Hall is going to be playing within the next, they just got drilled by Iowa, but they're going to be playing Memphis on Thanksgiving night. And then the following week, they're going to be playing Kansas. So they have some big games, and it seems to all focus around Thanksgiving. Other games are on the tube that you can watch. And the beauty is you don't even have to wait until 8 o'clock. Some of these games, if you come home Monday from work or Tuesday from work or certainly Wednesday from work, they've been going on for 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So really is. If you're making those last minute preparations, or you're just getting together finally with some family who've arrived early from other parts of the country, and they've arrived to spend Thanksgiving with you, you can sit down, have a beer, enjoy the games, and have some fun, but not at 8 o'clock at night, at 4 and 5 in the afternoon. So I think it really adds to the whole celebration of Thanksgiving. And of course, we can't forget what Thanksgiving truly is, but the games and the festivities just add to it. When I was a kid, I I guess you could actually argue that the amount of games that are being played, whether it's basketball or college football or even the pros, probably has really taken the place of one of the traditions New Jersey high school football used to have, and that would be to end everyone's seasons, or almost everyone's seasons, usually on Thanksgiving. And that was a big deal when I was growing up. Uh, People would come home from college, they'd celebrate with their friends the Wednesday night, and then really have a high school reunion the following day. And it didn't just matter whether it was the year before or 10 years before or 20. Some of these high school reunions slash Thanksgiving Day games have been existing for 40, 50 years. And of course, with all of the number of uh, playoff games now being played, there's been less and less of an emphasis on the Thanksgiving Day game. And I think we're missing something with that, because it definitely is a community type of celebration. It does bring family and friends together in a different way. And what made it fun was the games are at 10, 10:30, maybe 11 o'clock. They would be done by 1, and it would be just in time for your Thanksgiving Day celebration. And then, of course, you would segue into watching the NFL. I wish they could bring that back in some way, shape, or form. Maybe 10 years from now, we'll see that there will be a resurrection of those Thanksgiving Day games, because they're a lot of fun. And it's not, like I said, just the games on the field, it's the reunions off the field as well. Speaking of which, I just want to segue into the fact that the Detroit Lions again are going to be playing on Thanksgiving. And I thought I was going to have to go back quite a bit, because let's face it, the Lions have not been a very competitive team in my lifetime. As I've mentioned on previous shows, they've had a couple of years there where they made the playoffs. The one I most recall is 1970, and that year they played uh, the Cowboys as the wild card representative for the NFL. I played them the Saturday after Christmas and lost the game 5-0. That kind of basically tells you how the Detroit Lions have been for the last 50 years. But lo and behold, uh, before I was born, those Lions had some great teams during the 50s, really amazing teams. And They actually won a championship in 1957. So the people in Motown have been waiting since 1957 for the Lions to get back up. One of the things I always liked about the Lions, now we had black and white TVs when I was a kid. Couldn't afford color. They were a luxury. Now you can't find a black and white. Everything is in color. But I was always fascinated with the color of Columbia blue and the gray. I always thought they had one of the best uniforms in the NFL. In fact, in all of the NFL. They were right up there, like the Vikings, of course, like the Cowboys. Never really liked the Giants uniform. I just thought they could always do something more. Although I will take the NY they have now, although I wish they would recognize New Jersey more, and I have come up with a logo for that in case the NFL would ever wants to reach out. I can share that with you. I doubt it, but it's available, and I think it would really resonate with New Jersey fans. Anyway, Detroit didn't realize this. They've only had 6 players who have had their number retired. Dutch Clark, number 7, Barry Sanders, number 20, Bobby Lane, 22, Doak Walker, 37, Joe Schmidt, 56, and Chuck Huggins, 85. And I didn't realize that, because I'm thinking Alex Karras, 71, and Lem Barney, number 20. So I'm hoping that that'll occur, because Lem Barney was a great player, great cornerback. I focused on him again in past programs. And how can you not like Alex Karras? Always enjoyed Karras, not just as an actor. He was great in Blazing Saddles, but I always just got a kick out of him uh, as a football player because he's so was the quintessential lineman of the NFL that I like to draw my cartoons on. Not, let's say, a sculpted athlete like you see today. Not sir. He was a large human being. I think he was about 6'3", maybe 265, but he certainly would pale in comparison to some of the ball players today that are playing the line in terms of height and weight, 6'5", 270, 280, who run like gazelles. So I'm hoping that eventually they'll retire their numbers as well. Number 20, Lem Barney, and number 71, Alex Karras. And of course, there's others too. Those are just two that jump out at me. I remember having Barney's card and thought it was terrific having Lem Barney's football card. And the only reason it sticks out is because I didn't collect football cards with the same vigor and same enthusiasm as baseball cards. My theory about that is that, well, football was in the fall, and baseball, of course, being played in the summer, you had many days where the days were obviously longer. You had things, so you could really devote some time walking down to the Five and Dime or the local grocery store, which was really had everything. The newspapers had a little bakery, all the rest of it. And you could pick up in the candy section or even in the candy store your baseball cards and then walk home and not have to worry about the sun setting too soon or the cold or other kinds of things. Collecting baseball cards was just a different feeling than collecting football cards. And obviously, the football cards over the years really didn't have the same attraction, definitely, like the baseball cards do. So, but I do remember getting a Lem Barney card and thought it was so cool. And obviously, I think it was like a 1969 or 70. It was just a headshot of Lem Barney without the helmet. I do know he does have the helmet, and it's a great helmet with that Lions. Have they improved it? I guess they have. You could say making it more fierce and having almost a double tone to it. But there's something about those 70 uniforms, and I'm becoming nostalgic about it, that I like the simplicity of that Lion uniform. Love the simplicity of the Cowboy uniform back then. And one uniform that you would love to see the Cowboys wear was those. They'll never really wear them again because they think they just bring bad luck. Are their away uniforms, which are the dark blue jerseys and the silver or metallic gray pants or knickers, as they used to call them. And they were just great uniforms too. And when you see some of the old highlights of them, you do appreciate it, but you will understand why the Cowboys won't wear them because they always seem to get beat in those uniforms. And of course, the Cowboys have been since '66 with a couple of just mistakes by the NFL, have not played 75 and 77. They have not played on Thanksgiving Day. And, you know, their owners, Gil Brandt, they realized the beauty of playing on Thanksgiving. And that was the fact that you really had a contained audience, people at relatives, houses, friends, families getting together. Hey, let's watch football. And the Cowboys realized what they got. And that's why they became America's team. Plus, they played some exciting Thanksgiving Day games. They usually played the later game, the 4 o'clock one. So that went from 4 to 7 later in the afternoon. I remember that the Lions games I didn't watch as much because you had so much going on earlier in the day with high school football, at least in New Jersey. And then you would come home and maybe see the second half. And by that time, either friends and family were going off to people's houses, whatever. It's funny now that I have my own house and I'm married, I seem to watch the Lions more now than I did when I was a kid because we've moved up our Thanksgiving Day celebrations to earlier in the day. So it's kind of wild. Anyway, I didn't realize this. Well, I did know this. I know that the Lions do not have a home field advantage on Thanksgiving Day. They actually have an under 500 record. And then I was thinking, all right, this might be some fun. When was the last time the Lions had a winning record and played on Thanksgiving Day? I didn't really have to go back that far. It was 2017, and they lost to the Vikings on November 23rd, 2017. They finished the season 9-7. So I was kind of surprised with that. Now, do they have some great Thanksgiving Day games? They had for a run there. The Lions and the Packers would meet from the late 50s to around the mid 60s, where they played every year on Thanksgiving. I just remember this. When I was growing up, it seemed like uh, Detroit was playing a different team every year. Then when I got into my 20s, it seemed like they were always either playing the Packers, the Minnesota Vikings, or the Bears. And it was the Cowboys who were playing a number of different teams every year. They never had a set team that they played. Now it seems just the opposite. Although this year, the Giants are playing the Cowboys again, first time I think since '92. And they really haven't had a great record, the Giants. I was looking at this, never hosted a game on Thanksgiving. They were always a road team. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they don't perform all that well. But when they have not scored a touchdown in about 40 years of playing on Thanksgiving. So they hope to end that this year playing the Cowboys in the late game or in the afternoon game at 4. I can't say that anymore because now they have the 8 o'clock game as well. All right. I hope you have fun. I hope you fill yourself with turkey and all the rest of it. Now, I'd like to get to something that just, and I'm going to do this on a future show, but I figure I would start with Rookies of the Year. First of all, always enjoyed the Rookie of the Year award. The very first one, of course, was Jackie Robinson. This has always been a great trivia question I love to ask. What position did Jackie Robinson play when he won the Rookie of the Year? And it was first base. Now, I know he moved to second and ended his career, I believe, at third base. Jackie actually came up and was put at first base. So my whole premise with the Rookie of the Year, and of course it has changed its name. I do believe they call it the Jackie Robinson Award. He being the first winner, why not? I hope they never do that. I like the award being named Jackie Robinson, but they have the Cy Young, so we already recognize who is the winner. That it's the pitching award. I hope they never change the MVP. I hope they don't call it the Babe Ruth Award. I hope they never call it the Mickey Mantle Award or anything like that. And the reason being, I know that there have been arguments and debates. I like the term most valuable player, not best player of the year, but I like the most valuable player. And I also like the fact that baseball does include in its MVP selections pitchers because they can be valuable, just as valuable as any quote unquote everyday player. Now, I know people say, well, the most they can play is a quarter of the year if you're a starting pitcher, if you got 40 starts. That's the most that he can have in terms of impact. I totally disagree because I think a great pitcher means more to your team than just going out there once every 4 days. And my point, ask Steve Carlton, ask Bob Gibson, ask Tom Seaver, ask Ron Guidry, ask the Yankees, 1978, if they appreciated Ron Guidry. Now I know he won the Cy Young and he didn't win the MVP; he lost it to Jim Rice, and that was always a great debate as well. But ask those teams whether they appreciated having a pitcher who could stop a long losing streak by being able to go out there and potentially thwart a 6-7 game losing streak because he was coming out there. Ask Sandy Koufax. How did I miss Sandy Koufax? Ask Warren Spahn. Ask any of the players who played behind those pitchers. Ask them if they weren't valuable. And again, I know that Warren Spahn didn't, but certainly Koufax, along with Drysdale, were an impressive staff. That being stated, I wanted to look at this and say, all right, how many times have the writers made mistakes So I went through all of the awards going from 1947 to the present. Uh, I'm not going to obviously go over all the teams or all of the awards or all the winners every year, but just a couple. Some things that I kind of discovered going along. I'm going to point this out. Obviously, Jackie Robinson was the first player to win the MVP. People don't realize this, though. Alvin Dark was the second rookie of the year in 1948 playing for the Boston Braves. And it seemed like for the first 4 or 5 years, either the Braves or the Dodgers dominated the awards because in 1950, ready for this, the city of Boston had both winners. They had Sam, I think his nickname was Jethro, who came up to the Braves and had a couple of, was a real spark plug. I think towards the tail end of 1950, stole a lot of bases, threw some walks. Good player for that year. His career never really materialized as well as you want. I do think he came up at an older age from the old Negro leagues. And then the other winner was Walt Dropo, who had a impressive first year in the major leagues with the Red Sox. He was a big bopping first baseman. But after that first year, his production slid. And you wonder if really the second place winner should have been the rookie of the year. And that, of course, and Yankee fans are going to agree there, that is Whitey Ford, who for the 1950 Yankees went 9-1 with a 2.81 ERA. Dropo's WAR was 2.6, and Whitey Ford's was 2.5. But recall, Ford comes up late. Well, I shouldn't say late, but as the season was well underway. Let's just put that. And then he earned 9 of 10 decisions with a pretty good ERA, 2.81. Not just pretty good, very good for the 1950 Yankees, helping him to spark the Yankees to a 4-game sweep over the Philadelphia Phillies. The following year, of course, they got it right. Willie Mays, although how do I say this? Any other player who had Willie Mays' stats would be happy, and they would be impressive as Rookie of the Year. But Willie Mays, even though he had 3.9 WAR, and I still don't understand that, but I'm recognizing it and trying to understand it because there are some. I really think Ernie Banks is a guy that WAR was not configured for, but Mays drew 57 walks that year. And I've talked about Mays and the walks and all the rest of it. Do you realize, as I stated in one episode, he was the oldest man ever to lead the league in walks, drew over 100 walks, the only time in his career he drew over 100 walks, and that was at age 40 in 1971. He was just I've always maintained this with Willie Mays. He may not have, quote unquote, the consistent stats that Aaron, Musial, Williams have, and Gehrig. I like to put that up there too. But it always seemed to me, when you look at his stats, if you needed a guy to lead you in triples, it was Mays. If you needed a guy to lead you in home runs, it was Mays. Never led in RBIs, but if you needed more RBIs, Willie Mays would do it. If you needed a guy to lead you in batting average, boom. And with that, he's giving you superlative feeling to boot. So Mays in 1951, here's his stats. And you know what? I didn't figure this out. I'd like to take his first, let's say, 20 bats out of it and see what his batting average is. It's higher. But Mays gave you 20 home runs, 68 RBIs, and 274. And I think if you took out Mays' first 5, 6, 7 games, where I think he went 1 for 20 and was starting to give up on himself, but fortunately, Leo Durocher said to him, you're my center fielder. I'm sticking with you. You take those out, and he probably has a 290 average for the rest of the year. So you can almost throw those 5, 6 games out as just a rookie just becoming a major league player. And you'll understand what I'm saying. Mays, 20, 68, 274. For Mays. For other players, you're looking at it and saying, wow, I take that in a heartbeat. 20 homers, 68 RBIs, 274. And of course, Mays, here's the great thing. The guy who finished in second place behind Mays was a fellow by the name of Chet Nichols, who was 11-8 with a sterling 2.88 ERA. But he finished with a 34-36 lifetime record. I think what hurt him was that after his rookie year, he had 2 years of military service, and when he comes back, he's never the same pitcher. And how do I know that? Well, he only won 23 wins after that and lost 28. So he went from being, hey, maybe a rookie phenom into basically a mediocre pitcher. And I do think he probably lost something because of the military service. All right, 51, I got to say this. It's New York has the other winner of the rookie year. Now, I know New York had 3 of the 16 teams. Boston had 2 of the 16 teams. Chicago had 2 of the 16 teams. But it is still kind of remarkable that within the first few years, Boston has the first double winners, American and National, and then right after that you have New York double winners with Gil McDougall winning and Willie Mays. Now, I know many Yankee fans would be happy that Gil McDougall won, but the guy who finished behind him was a fellow by the name of Minnie Minoso, who probably should have copped the title. Now, of course, the Yankees won the World Series in 51. McDougall was part of it. He won it as a third baseman. Minoso, interestingly enough, was traded his rookie year from Cleveland to Chicago, but he had some monster years. Now, was Minoso Aaron, Mays? No, certainly not. I think he is seen as a second tier player, probably above a guy like Lou Brock, and probably just a notch below Roberto Clemente. But you take a look at his stats, Minoso. I mean, he led in triples. He was not really a good stealer, high percentage base stealer, but he hammered the ball. In fact, his best year, 1954, he was an MVP. Well, fourth, he was chosen fourth in the MVP voting. Ready for this? He had 29 doubles, 18 triples, and 19 homers for the White Sox. And he drove in 116 RBIs with a 320 average. Now, did he do that every year? No, but he did enough. He was really a solid player, a very good player. Not A+++ like Aaron, Williams, and Mays, Mantle, all those guys. And I'm just using guys of his contemporaries. But he was better than a Lou Brock, maybe a little bit lower than Roberto Clemente, probably because of Clemente's stellar defense. But he's right there. And I was so glad that baseball does finally induct him into the Hall of Fame. And of course, he did, the Bill Veeck thing where he played in like 7 decades. Veeck would call him out of retirement at the old folks' home and say, Minnie, come in and just play one game. And he would in the 70s and stuff like that to qualify for the decade of the 70s. But Minoso would go 2 for 3 and steal a base at the age, that everyone else is retired in a rocking chair. He was incredible. All right. 52 was interesting because you have a guy by the name of Joe Black, solid pitcher, but he finishes above 2 players who would go on to have Hall of Fame careers. One was Hoyt Wilhelm, and the other, of course, was Eddie Matthews. Pretty interesting. Okay. So you would obviously, now Black went 15-4 for the Dodgers, 2.15 ERA. In 54, even though they got it right with Bob Grimm, he finishes ahead of future Hall of Famer Al Kaline, who that year for Detroit was 4 homers, 43 RBIs, 276. But you got to remember, Detroit is terrible during the 50s. Then, of course, I just want to mention this. 1954. I hope I have it here. Yes, I do. This is the fella, Wally Moon. Wally came up in 1954 for St. Louis, hit a bucket full of home runs. And the interesting thing is, he had a 3 WAR. And the two guys he finished ahead of, ready for this, in the Rookie of the Year were Ernie Banks, who had a 2.5 WAR, and Hank Aaron, who had a 1.4. Now, I have to be honest here. I'm going to throw WAR out. Don't know why the Cardinals of 54 would garner so much attention with Moon playing first base as opposed to Banks coming up as a shortstop and playing. Yes, I know the Cubs were terrible, but Banks uh, uh, and Aaron, his first year in, Aaron only hit 13 homers his first year, but they are building an impressive team, that Milwaukee Braves, because they have 2 years before that. You have Eddie Matthews. Now you have Aaron, and I've detailed this on a number of shows where Aaron was moved around quite a bit. He just didn't play the outfield his whole career, and he didn't play just first base at the tail end of his career. The Braves experimented with him at second and third base. Now, had he really taken to second base, can you imagine that infield? You have Eddie Matthews, 512 career home runs, and of course, Henry Aaron, 755 lifetime. It's 1,200 home runs in your infield. But of course, Aaron, they move him out to the outfield, probably his natural position. He was a solid defensive player, a right fielder for most of his career. At least that's how I remember him. And but I would have to say that even though Moon had a 3.0 WAR, he's playing first base, and the other two are playing more important positions in my mind. Obviously, Banks is at short because you're strong up the middle, and I know that Aaron in that first year, his freshman year, was playing a number of positions, mostly the outfield. All right, 56 I thought was kind of interesting because this is the first time that the rookies of the year will both be future Hall of Famers. Up until this time, only Mays and Robinson are going to be future Hall of Famers. But 1956, you'd have to say that the writers got it right because Frank Robinson and Louis Aparicio both win the Rookie of the Year. Aparicio does it with the White Sox and leads, I think, the league in stolen bases, although he, again, early in his career, does not have a high percentage. When I say high percentage, the metrics tells us today, and I would agree with this analysis, that you should have 70 to about a 75% is an effective stolen base rate. Aparicio, I think, early in his career was about 66, 67. Good, but you're thinking of a Hall of Famer maybe 70, 75%. However, Frank Robinson also does this. He's the first unanimous winner of the Hall of Fame, of the Rookie of the Year. 6.5 WAR, which up to that point had been the highest, I do believe. Ready for this? He goes 38, 83, and 290 for the Cincinnati Reds. Now, people will say, well, he played in a small ballpark, Crosley Field, and all the rest of it. But at that time, he had set the rookie record for most home runs with the 38. But again, here's a team, the Reds built. I was thinking about this the other day when I was thinking about Robinson. Suppose the Reds had kept Robinson and not traded him. Now, even though the Big Red Machine would be on the other side of Robinson being 30 plus, and really his last effective year in the major leagues is probably 1969. Had some good years, but not great ones, right? That age is starting to get with him. But in 66, of course, he's traded and wins the Triple Crown and MVP. We talked about that in a previous episode. But can you imagine that the Big Red Machine had Robinson and then made the deal? So they would have had Robinson, Morgan, Bench, Perez. But they would have had Robinson even with that 70 team. You had Lee May at first, Robinson anchoring right field. Bernie Carbo, who had been a rookie that year, probably would have been a super sub, and it just would have uh, really been an outstanding team. And had they had the DH, then you'd say, all right, we're going to put Robinson, May, we're going to alternate all these guys, including Bench, as the DH. That's the what if. It's fun, but who knows what would have happened. As I always state, the Reds had won the World Series in 1970. They may not have ever made the trade for Morgan and become the real big red machine. It might have been a one and done like the White Sox in the early 21st century. Anyway, 58-59. Ready for this? Back-to-back unanimous selections for Rookie of the Year. They're both San Francisco Giants, and their names are Orlando Cepeda and Willie McCovey. Can't really beat that. And then Frank Howard is at 60, Billy Williams 61, another Hall of Famer. So they've gotten it right 4 straight times. Well, I shouldn't say 4, but in 58, 59, and 61, you have 3 of the 4 years where they got it right. I'm just going to go down. Second time it ever happened in 1967. You have Rod Carew and Tom Seaver winning it. Now, let me just preface this by saying, ready for this? Probably a real year that you would contend with is 1965. Jim Lefevre wins the Rookie of the Year. He doesn't even come close in WAR to a guy that would be a future Hall of Famer, is probably arguably the greatest second baseman in the last 60, probably 70, and maybe of all time. Really wanted to argue that. And that's Joe Morgan of the Houston Astros. Well, they may have been the Colt 45s in the 65. But Morgan, ready for this? I think he might have been with. No, I think they still are the Colt 45s in 65. Okay. I was going to say this. I think the Dodgers during the 60s had a plethora of rookies of the year simply because they were always so successful. And they just seem to be the, how do I say this? You always saw the National League with the Dodgers, and I think it carried over. Jim Lefevre, of course, was the Rookie of the Year. What helped him was that the Dodgers not only win the pennant, but they win the World Series. Although they don't, you're selected on basically the last day of the year for these awards. So the Dodgers in '65 win the pennant, and of course Joe Morgan playing on, you know, a lesser team, the Astros, still 3 years into, or this would be their 4th season from the expansion year of 62. Bench wins it 68. Now here's an oddity. 1969 is the first time the Rookie of the Year comes from an expansion team, and that's Lou Piniella of the Kansas City Royals. And Lou, of course, I'm going to have to send it to Howard. I have a great picture of Lou Piniella. He has the same picture from 1968 as 69. He actually started with Baltimore, played with Cleveland, or was in the Cleveland chain, went to Seattle. Seattle trades him to the Kansas City Royals. They never thought much of him. And Piniella has a solid season for the Royals, but he is the first Rookie of the Year to win Rookie of the Year on an expansion team, and that's the Kansas City Royals. Okay, so that's a pretty interesting. 72, Fisk is a unanimous selection. And then I thought was funny is that in 75, Fred Lynn wins the Rookie of the Year, had an unbelievable WAR, 7.4, but it's Jim Rice who would become the Hall of Famer. Similar stats. Problem with Rice, he got hurt at the end of the year or in September and was not available for the playoffs or the World Series. And of course, Lynn really was brilliant the entire year, had some amazing plays and some big at-bats in the 75 World Series. The previous year, 74, Mike Hargrove, who was called the human rain delay, was the winner, but George Brett finished 4th, I believe, that year, and he would be the Hall of Famer. So you could actually argue that the writers got it wrong. Now, just flowing through here, 1976. Butch Metzger and Pat Zachary are the first Rookies of the Year to actually tie. This is how close it was. They both garnered the same amount of percentage, obviously, but their statistics are so similar. And here's the oddity. They both wind up on the Mets. Metzger's last year was 1978. And of course, Zachary was in his second year with the Mets, having been traded in the Tom Seaver deal. Interestingly, too, that Butch Metzger, it was I think like you could regard it as the Butch year because Butch Weiniger won, and so did, Butch Weiniger finished runner-up, and Butch Metzger finished tied. Butch Weiniger finished runner-up to Mark Fidrich, who had an incredible year. Probably could have had an incredible career had he not gotten hurt. The next year, you do have, again, two guys who would go on to the Hall of Fame in Dawson and Eddie Murray. And the funny thing is, I'm just going to finish this up. Didn't do anything from 96 to 2022. Not that I don't have it listed, but simply because none of those guys that I was looking at really have qualified just yet for the Hall of Fame. 1978, the guy who I've been touting for the Hall of Fame, Lou Whitaker, finishes first ahead of Hall of Famer Molitor and Hall of Famer and teammate Alan Trammell. You realize how good that Tiger team could have been in the middle of the 70s? They would have had Fidrich had he not gotten hurt. And then you have two great middle infielders in Whitaker and in Trammell. And then the rest are, Fernando Valenzuela, 81. Tim Raines was the future Hall of Famer who finished second to him. 79, you have Castino and Griffin tied. It's the first and only time in the American League that occurred. And then you have 1986, Todd Worrell. All right, he wins. And two guys. Well, I'm going to mention Barry Bonds probably will eventually be in the Hall of Fame, along with Barry Larkin, who finished seventh that year in the Hall of Fame. And then just to finish this up, you have Roberto Alomar, who didn't win it. He finished behind Chris Sabo in 88. Ken Griffey Jr. finished behind Greg 3Gs Olson of the Baltimore Orioles in 1989. Dave Justice finished in front of Larry Walker, recent Hall of Fame. All right. And I tell you, the reason why I said it, you would think that Justice was going to have the Hall of Fame, but he doesn't. All right. Knobloch finishes ahead of Ivan Rodriguez, and Piazza finishes ahead of Pedro Martinez. They probably got it right there. Most Rookie of the Year, Dodgers, with 18. The Yankees have 9, along with the Atlanta Braves with 9, or the Braves franchise has 9. Interestingly enough, the A's, Philadelphia, and in Oakland, but not KC, had 8 Rookie of the Year, and the New York Giants probably have the highest percentage of Rookie of the Years who go on to win or be selected to Cooperstown, 4 of 6 winners, with potentially Buster Posey being the next one selected in the Hall of Fame, which would give them 4 out of 6, 67%. Not too bad. Hey, everyone, happy Thanksgiving. Will O'Toole, thank you again. Shout out to Howard Fredericks for all his help. Join me next week. Thank you.